Today, we're going to talk about the 5 qualities that, as a feminine woman, you need to embody. And if you're live, let me know right now that you're watching so that we can interact. And if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. If you're watching this later on the replay, don't worry about that. You can still ask questions, and I will come back later on today or tomorrow and answer those questions. So, again, we're talking about the 5 qualities that you must embody as a feminine woman, and I'm just pulling up my notes here. So let me know as I go through these which ones really resonate with you and which ones you feel like you need a little bit more help with. So the first quality that you need to embody as a feminine woman is gentleness. And I want to be very clear about what gentleness means, because again, there's this whole perception that gentle, feminine, those words mean soft and weak. And first of all, weak, absolutely not. There is nothing more powerful than feminine energy, than embracing the fact that you are a queen, you are a goddess. So first of all, stand in that power. And even when we talk about soft or we talk about gentleness, these are not weak qualities either. There is power in knowing when to keep your mouth shut and when to be quiet. There is power in knowing what it means to use kind words to turn away anger, to be able to use your feminine energy, your softness to make someone calm down, to get them to sit and listen to your point of view. And you have to remember that this is part of a balanced relationship. So for a man, we've talked about the fact that as a woman, you embody some masculine energy and some masculine traits. So when you feel yourself quick to anger, quick to lose your temper, you have to remember that that is part of you. Masculine energy, which again, you have some, part of masculine energy is drive, push, and aggression. So you have that aggression inside of you. And if you've been spending your life working in the corporate world or as an entrepreneur, then you are primed to show your aggression, to be tough, to stand up to people because you're told to do things like that because that's how a man's world operates. And let's face it, the corporate world, even the business world, they were created by men. So that's how they were taught to handle things. It's that old boys club mentality. So as a woman, you have to learn how to control that energy. Because what happens is when you don't control that energy, you become highly unattractive to men. They're looking for their counterpart. So that masculine aggression, they're looking for your feminine gentleness to balance that. But beyond that, let's say you end up in a marriage and you're with a man and the two of you are together and everything. If you don't have your gentleness under control, if you don't know how to come at a man in a soft, feminine way, then your relationship is just full of conflict and strife. It's two masculine energies constantly battling with each other. And really, who wants that? Who wants to raise kids in that environment? Who wants to do date night in that environment? Who wants to have sex in that environment where you're constantly pushing at each other and there's no form of you being cherished? Your gentleness inspires a man to cherish you. It also inspires a man to be vulnerable and to open up to you. So you have to learn how to choose your words carefully. You have to learn how to not be so quick to raise your voice. You have to learn how to approach a man in a way that is soft, to touch a man in a way that is soft and not harsh. I see women who are so set in that pattern of masculinity that even when they grab their boyfriends, it's like a grab, is very harsh. You have to learn how to control those instincts. So the second quality that a feminine woman needs to embody is discernment. And, we talk about this very often, but women's intuition is a real and true thing. Women's intuition, God gave it to us for a purpose. And we hone our discernment by one, learning to be present in the moment. So when you are constantly letting 50 million things run through your mind, what happens is your discernment gets turned off because discernment requires clarity. It requires a clear space in which to operate. So when you're on a date, you need to be listening intently to what the man is telling you. If you're texting back and forth or you're on the phone together, then you need to be listening or reading those text messages carefully. Instead, too often, women are multitasking. You're on the phone with a guy while you're cooking dinner, while you're half watching a TV show, while you're, doing laundry, God knows what other chores you're doing. And because you are so in this habit of multitasking, you miss things. A man will tell you his true intentions, and he will tell you, for example, that he's not ready to be in a relationship. And you completely miss that because you're so busy doing so many other things. You have to learn how to quiet your mind. And as I tell you this, I am also speaking to myself because it's something that I continue to struggle with, and I've been working on this for years. But you have to learn how to quiet your mind. And the best to do that is to spend more time to committing to prayer and to meditation, to really learning how to get silent with God, to really get to a point where you're not just talking at God and asking for things, but you are also actively listening back and you are waiting for a response. Is when you start to learn how to hone that silence that God gets better at speaking through you, speaking to you, and then you're able to really listen to what a man has to say. So again, perception is so important because perception, discernment, whichever word you like to use, is the key to protecting yourself from entering into another hurtful situation, another hurtful relationship. So, number 3 is persuasion. And persuasion really actually goes along really well with gentleness. I probably should have made that one the second one. But persuasion is quite simply the ability to convince people to do what you want. And this is not a manipulative thing. I don't want you to start thinking that way or start trying to trick a man into loving you. But persuasion is knowing how to make an argument in a way that gets a man to listen. So part of that is your gentleness, your softness. Men pay attention to that. And the reason why they pay attention to that is because they live in a man's world that's so full of aggression and so full of loudness that when a woman has the audacity to be quiet and soft, they're like, whoa, like what's happening? They want to tune in and find out a little bit more about what's going on. So part of your persuasion is your gentleness. Part of your persuasion is your ability to think from the perspective of another person. So think about this. When you look at how society is run and you look at all these ideas about men being eternal bachelors and how they have so many options nowadays, or there are more women around than there are men, you have to think. So think about a man like George Clooney, for example. George Clooney was single forever. He managed to get very up there in age before he got married to Amal Clooney. So think from that type of man's perspective. What motivation is there for a man to commit to you? For a man to actually put a ring on it, to dismiss other women, to dismiss the other possibilities that he has in dating. And your persuasion is making that argument, and not in a way where you're going to a man and you're like, hey, the reason why you need to settle down and marry me and put a ring on it is this. But it is thinking in terms of Okay, a man doesn't want to settle down because he's afraid of losing adventure. He's afraid of monotony, of life being the same thing day in and day out. Well, how can you show him that life with you is not going to be the same every single day, that you have a sense of adventure, that you have plenty of things to talk about, that there's plenty of you to get to know, that there are so many layers behind you? A man will think, well, I'm not going to settle down and I'm not going to commit because why would I do that when there are all these women out here? Well, how do you stand out from those other women? What sets you apart? What makes you unique? And it is in talking about those things, it is in showing those things that make you persuasive. And it's also, when you get into a relationship, doing things like, I don't nag my husband about doing the dishes. But when he does the dishes, I hug him and I give him a kiss and I thank him for it. And you might say, well, the two of you are both adults and like both of you should be doing that anyways. Yeah, that's totally true. But me saying that is not very persuasive. But him doing the dishes and me giving him a kiss afterwards, that is persuasive. And then I don't have to nag him about it. He does it regularly. So pick and choose your battles. Now, we're on four. Sorry, guys. The fourth quality that a feminine woman has to embody is this ties along with persuasion, and it is seduction. So, seduction is the ability to make sure that everyone you encounter has a pleasurable experience from being around you. And yes, this ties in very well with persuasion, but also, I want you to hone your seduction because seduction is not just sex. And people seem to think that all the time. And yeah, your sex appeal is part of it. So, absolutely, when you are going on dates or we're doing this live still in the middle of coronavirus. So if you are on a Skype date or a Zoom date, absolutely. Do your hair up, dress nicely, make sure that you look your absolute best, whatever your absolute best is. But at the same time, again, seduction is the ability to leave people with an impression of pleasure. So this is not just about sexual relationships. You can seduce your friends, you can seduce your coworkers, you can seduce your family members. Seduction is about, I actually posted this on Instagram the other day. People will never remember the things that you say to them, but they will always remember how you make them feel. So, what can you do to leave someone with a feeling of pleasure? And this does not mean that you do this at the expense of yourself, because that's highly unattractive. When a woman is so into people pleasing that she loses herself in the process. But what can you do from a place of joy for you that also inspires joy in others? So this means specifically with men, complimenting a man. Hey, you have a great sense of style. Hey, you really make me laugh. You're incredibly funny. Giving those genuine compliments. So don't say it if you don't mean it. But giving compliments like that is a way of seduction, is a way of inducing pleasure. And yes, the way you look is a matter of seduction. There is a reason why, you see so many women who are you think of these women who are like sex symbols, or you think of these women that everyone looks to as being like, oh my goodness, she's a goddess, like she's so hot, she's so sexy. There's a reason why these women wear red a lot. Whether that is they wear red clothes, or they have a tendency to wear red lipstick, or they put rouge on their cheeks. Red is a color of seduction. It is psychologically proven that that color raises a man's arousal. So it is in the way you dress, but it is also in the way you act. So, what can you do to seduce a potential partner in a way beyond just your physical appearance? That is compliments. That is being fun to be around. That is, if you're funny, then lean into that. Lean into the jokes you make. But again, you want to leave a person with a sense of pleasure. So, number 5, we are on the last one, and that is charisma. That is charm. Charm, charisma, whichever word you'd like to use. But that is the ability to attract others based on simply their perception of you. So, again, this dovetails into all the other 4 that we just mentioned. But charisma is the ability to make people feel like when they leave the room, they are better off for having known you. So, let's talk about how that is different from seduction, because we just talked about how seduction is all about pleasure. And yes, it is about leaving a memorable impression. But think about this. So, seduction is you have a conversation with someone, the person tells a funny joke, and you go home, you call one of your friends, and you talk about meeting that person. And you say, "Oh my goodness, that person was so funny. They were telling jokes the whole night, and they were just really great, and yeah, he was just really funny." And your friend is like, "Oh, okay, so what was he talking about?" And you think about it for a second, and you don't remember a single joke that this man told you. That is seduction. Okay, so you know that you feel better, that you like being in their presence, but it's not necessarily the most memorable experience ever. Not everything about them is memorable. So you remember, dude is funny, but again, you can't remember the jokes. What charisma is about is not only did the person make you feel better, they made you feel like a better person. So think about this. You go out to that same event, you meet a guy, the two of you are talking, and in the process, you get into a really deep conversation, and there's something that he says in the conversation that you may not remember the rest of that conversation, but there's one thing that he said that makes you think all night, all day. You spend days thinking about that concept, and you feel like you know better, you've grown, you've learned, you've evolved um, as a result of that one conversation. That is charisma. That is the ability to really truly leave a lasting impression on someone. So that is something that you want to hone, because again, going back to, you know, talking about seduction and charisma, these two go together. So you want to be at a point where, one, you immediately strike pleasure in whoever you're talking to. Because, yes, we're here to talk about dating and relationships and love, but these exact same qualities also work in the boardroom. They also work in your business. They also work in your job. So these work with your boss as well. Or if you are the boss, these work with your clients or your customers as well. You want to be in a position where you immediately strike pleasure in someone. That's seduction. You also want to be at a point where you stand out, because you not only immediately strike pleasure, but you do or say something that keeps them thinking about you, that keeps them thinking about a certain conversation you said. That is charisma. So, seduction is short term pleasure, charisma is long term growth, and long term growth as a result of you. Something about you inspires the person to want to be funnier. Like, it doesn't have to be that deep. But you could tell such good jokes or such good stories that they're like, man, I want to be around them more because I want to hear more of these stories. Or, I felt like I learned something from something that she said, and I want to know more. This is why, as a feminine woman, as a high value woman, you must stay on your game. And I don't want this to, sound like you have to be perfect, because I'm not perfect. No one is. But being on your game means that you have to stay informed with what's happening in the news. You have to be reading, listening to podcasts. You have to constantly be growing yourself, because that's how you inspire growth in others, and that is charisma. So again, those are the 5 qualities that a feminine woman must embody. We were talking about gentleness. We were talking about discernment or perception, whichever word sticks with you better. We talked about persuasion, seduction, and charisma.